Hi, everybody. Welcome to PD in your PJs. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight for this 30-minute session. You should hear me talking now, but I do want to assure you that we're recording this session and you'll get it in an email shortly after we conclude tonight. More importantly, we'll also share the slides so you'll get all those tips and resources coming to you in an email as well. And we'll try to save a few minutes for questions at the end. Quick introduction before we get started talking about Seesaw with conferences. I'm Julie. I'm just out of the high school ELA classroom where I was a teacher for 18 years. I'm now on the teacher community team at Seesaw. You can find me on Twitter at EdTechJulieJ, so that's a great place to find me if you have questions about anything you hear tonight or otherwise. And of course, Seesaw's on Twitter at Seesaw. Now, what I do want to tell you tonight is that our presentation tonight is not about getting started with Seesaw or getting families connected to Seesaw. So if you're looking for that kind of information, don't forget you can visit ideas.seesaw.me to find everything you need to get started. And if you like what you hear tonight, you can always find some upcoming PD webinars by going to web.seesaw.me/PDs. I also want to tell you that when we're done with the webinar tonight, stay on your computer for just a few more minutes and answer the survey questions. We're really interested in getting your feedback, and we actually use that to draw one random winner for a t-shirt. So we want you to have a chance to win, so be sure to stay on and answer those survey questions for us. I'm so excited tonight to be here with Andrea. She's my friend in real life, and I have experienced student-led conferences as a parent in her classroom. She's also been my teaching colleague and is now in the role of elementary counselor, and she really was my role model for doing student-led conferences with my own students in the high school classroom. So I'm really excited to be here with her and for you to hear what she has to say. She's going to be talking tonight about using Seesaw in a more traditional parent-teacher conference and also in a student-led conference. So I'm going to give her the controls here in just a second so she can show you her slides, and then she'll take it away. Okay, can you see it, Andrea? There we go. We gotcha. Okay, take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie. That's very nice of you. Like Julie said, my name is Andrea Birzer, and I am currently the school counselor for K-6 here in Ellenwood, Kansas. I come from the first grade classroom where I taught for 5 years, and so I have done a little bit of both student-led conference and then, of course, teacher-parent conferences. So I've tried a little bit of both, but my experience I'm excited to share with you tonight is mainly about student-led conferences. And again, I come from the little kid world, so first graders, you know, they're young, they're little, but they can do it. They can do student-led conferences, and Seesaw makes that happen. It makes it super easy. But a little bit more about me. I'm a Seesaw ambassador, and I love to spend time with my family and enjoy just some hobbies at home, baking, sewing, and reading. But again, I love helping kids, and now in this new role as the counselor, I have an opportunity to work with all kids K through 6, which is really exciting. We have used student-led conferences here in our building. I've done it in my classroom, and then we have a lot of different teachers in our building who are also doing it. So there's a lot of opportunity with that, and I'm excited to share with you. So as we move through some of these slides, you're going to realize that a lot of this is geared towards student-led conference, but all of it is applicable to regular parent-teacher conferences as well. Seesaw makes that happen so easily. I'm going to touch on a few different things, and it might get your brain rolling, and you might come up with some of your own ideas, which is fantastic. But when you are thinking about Seesaw, it is great for parent-teacher conferences. I have a few images up here, and you can see the folders aspect of Seesaw is fantastic. It is so easy to organize your items. The great thing is that you can create the folders, and then you can put items in the folder, or the kids can put items in that folder. Items can go to different folders, so there's a lot of possibility there. And it just makes things very easy to find, especially when you're preparing for conferences, whether it's parent-teacher or student-led. As you can see, that very top folder that I have in that example says SLC. I always use SLC as an abbreviation for student-led conference. So kids in my class knew that the red folder, SLC, was where they needed to drop their items for student-led conferences that they'd be sharing. Another little tip that you might have heard buzzing around Seesaw World is that when you put a number in front of it or an emoji or something like that, it can pop up to the very top of the list and be easy to find, especially for those little guys. You want it to be quick and easy for them to access when they're trying to organize their items. And of course, Seesaw is a place where we have fantastic examples of work. You know, we don't always have perfect work, which is great because in Seesaw we have authentic examples of that work. You can see right there that that math problem is not correct, but by showing some of these authentic examples to parents, it allows us to open up a conversation about areas for improvement, areas of strengths. So just seeing real, true, authentic work from kiddos is great and is exactly what you would want in a conference. And then, of course, the skills aspect allows teachers to kind of pinpoint some things that are great and things that we could work on. So that makes it fantastic for conferences as well. Now we're going to talk about student-led conferences a little bit. You're probably wondering, why on earth would I want to do that? It seems like so much work. But in reality, when you do student-led conferences, it takes a little bit off of your plate, and it allows kiddos to be responsible for their learning, which is exactly what we want. So when kiddos are doing their student-led conference, they have ownership of their learning. You know, I always think about a conference and how typically and traditionally it's the teacher and the parent, and we're talking about the kid who may not even be present, which seems silly to me because we're talking about that kid who knows themselves so well. So why aren't we including them in that conversation, especially when we're talking about their strengths and their areas for improvement and goals? So it's just a great opportunity for students to build ownership of what they're learning. In addition, it gives them an opportunity to build some independence. So you'll see a picture here in a little bit, but when I do student-led conferences, the kiddo is sitting in the hot seat, they are speaking, so they're building on some of those skills, those life skills that are fantastic for their future. And by doing that, they're building independence too, which is exactly what we want to see in all of our kiddos. Kids are also very prideful. They are proud of what they do at school, and they are so excited to share that with their parent or their guardian. And so this gives them an opportunity to share what they know and take pride in all of their work. Students can also set some goals during this time and identify areas for improvement. We know that we all have some area that we can improve on. So for kiddos, when they can reflect on this, they're able to identify things that they're great at, but things that they can get better at too. And of course, it's a great time for them to share what they know because, you know, over the course of a semester or a quarter, they have learned a lot, and it's a great place for them to share with whoever is joining them for the conference. So you're probably wondering, where do I start? So I'm going to walk through the next few slides and kind of share with you how I made this happen. Again, some of these things might seem a little bit primary, and that's because I'm coming from first grade, but it is very doable for any grade level. I believe that this format would work clear up until 12th grade. So you can make this happen wherever you're coming from. So when I first started student-led conferences, I first asked myself, what do I want out of this? What do I want for myself as a teacher? And what do I want for the parents? And what do I want for the students? So I created some goals for myself and the students. And I wanted students to be able to have an opportunity to have a voice, share what they've been learning, take responsibility, and identify some strengths and weaknesses. Then the next step that I encourage you to do is create folders on your Seesaw, like I showed you in the previous few slides. So first, go ahead and organize your Seesaw with different content areas. So you might have a folder for science, math, reading. You can break it down into whatever way works for you in your class. But while you're doing that, go ahead and make a folder for student-led conference. And like I said earlier, put a number in front of it, and that will be easy for your kiddos to find. So then, after you've done all of that, when it comes time for your conference, people or kiddos will go ahead and get a self-evaluation. I think this is a great place for kids to do some self-reflection. I have this document here, self-evaluation. Again, it might look a little bit primary to some of you, but you guys could take it and make it work with whatever grade level you're working with. And again, this document is included in the slides, the documents that I'm going to share with you. So I post this image into Seesaw, and kiddos will copy and edit with the magic 3-dot button, and they'll copy and edit, and then they will complete according to how they feel about their behavior in their classroom. So again, this gives kids an opportunity to honestly reflect on what they've been doing and how they have been in your classroom. So sometimes kiddos might not always be honest right away. You're probably thinking that. But we always encourage kids to be truthful, because this is a great topic for conversation when it comes to meeting with parents, especially when the kid is in the hot seat and we're ready to talk about some of their self-evaluation, some of their behavior, and all of that stuff. So that's where I start with that, and then as we move on and we're preparing for student-led conferences, I make a checklist. So I will use this checklist with my students, and these are for first grade. So I wanted my kiddos in my class to share one math item, one reading item, one science item. You can see all of those right there, and yours might look a little bit different than that. But we would spend a little bit of time organizing our folders. So if kids were going to go find one math item that they wanted to share during conferences, they would go into their math folder, and they would look for a piece of their work, and then they would also add it to the student-led conference folder. And so by having this checklist, it's a way for kids to kind of keep track of what they're putting in their folder. One little tip, though, to remember is that you want work in that folder that is from the most current month or quarter or semester, or however you do your conferences. So we do our conferences mid-October, and so I encourage students to gather only items from that month or that recent quarter. And that is especially important as you have conferences in this spring semester coming up. And another tip there is that the calendar view is incredibly helpful. And sometimes with those little guys, it takes some teaching to do all of that, but it is very, very doable. Also, while I'm on this slide, and I think I've said this a little bit before, but you can have whatever you want right here. If you want kids to share something more specific from their math or more specific from their science work, you can make that right here on your checklist. All right. Now, when we talk about with kids what we want to go in that folder, we want quality, authentic work. So we want items that show their learning. Sometimes we put into Seesaw items that might be group work or might not exactly show their specific work. So I always encourage kids to find items in that specific content area that showed their learning. So you can see all of these items here show a kid's learning. That M&M math work right there shows exactly what they were doing for that concept of the tens facts. Those sounds right there were a concept that we worked with in phonics reading skills, and then of course our writing. So those examples right here are specifically items that show student work, which is exactly what we want when we're talking with parents. Now, of course, now that you have all of your folders organized, kids have put their work in, it's time to practice and prepare. You definitely don't want to walk into student-led conferences and say, go for it, and the kid have no idea their expectations or what to do. So I always do this a few days, maybe a week or two in advance of conferences, because we want them to be prepared as possible. And so I prepared a script for my kiddos that was pretty simple. You can see it right here. Their first job was to share what was in the student-led conference Seesaw folder that we'd already created. And then they were to share something they think they're good at, and then something they think they could get better at, which those 2 points of conversation allow kids to do some self-reflection. And then, of course, thank their adult for coming to their conference. And so with that, then kiddos are comfortable when they go to their conference and they're able to be prepared in what they're going to share. So something I've done with kids is we talk about this a few days before. I model very clearly how this should look using a loud, clear voice. And then I partner them up so they can practice with a classmate. But then this past semester, this past year, I asked for different adult stakeholders in our building, in our school district, to come and serve as a pretend parent during a student-led conference. So I had the principal come down and our reading specialist come down, and then kiddos would go practice with an adult. So it was a little more serious than just working with a classmate, but it gave them some good feedback too, because then that adult was conversing with them, asking them questions, and doing some reflecting as well. And then, of course, you want to tell your parents, because sometimes we know that we don't always have great turnout at conferences, but we really want them to be there this time, and parents need to know that their kid needs to come with them. So I would post a note in Seesaw, and you can definitely do that now with the messaging, and also I would send home a note to go home in their mailbox, so parents were very familiar with it. Their kid needed to be with them that evening. And I typically, when I did student-led conference, I think I probably had about 95% turnout. So it works very well. Parents are proud to hear their kids share their work. They're happy to be there, and students are excited to share too. It's kind of their time to shine. So it's a great opportunity for everybody. And then as we're there, as students are sharing during their conference time, they have their script in front of them. I would laminate it and put it right there in front of them. They'd have their iPad with them, and they'd be ready to share their items. But then I also posted a list of questions on the parent side of the table, because we want parents to engage in conversation with their kids, not just sit there and listen. We want them to ask a few questions and have a conversation about things they're good at and things they could get better at. So I have this list of questions here that I made available to parents to kind of push some questions and get a conversation started. So another tidbit before I sign off here, student-led conferences typically take about 20 to 30 minutes. So plan ahead. You know, your kiddos will talk for a little while, and then the parents will ask some questions, and then of course you as the teacher will probably want to add in some tidbits as well. So plan for, I'd say, at least 20 minutes, maybe 30, and you know your kids and your parents and your school best, so you can plan accordingly for that. But again, I have loved using Seesaw to drive our student-led conferences. It's a great way for students to share exactly what they've been learning and share their improvements, their strengths, their weaknesses. And the cool part is that students are excited to do this, and parents are excited as well, and it makes things really easy for you as a teacher too. So why not use Seesaw to make that happen? Here on one of our last slides are a few resources for you. That first link is a blog post that I've written. So if you'd like to read a little bit more, that's there. I've also created a Padlet with a lot of these resources, very similar post. And then that third link right there is a PDF of Google Docs of all of the freebie items that I'm going to share with you tonight. So all of these items that I've created and I've talked about to make student-led conferences happen with Seesaw are available for you right there. And then, of course, Seesaw has a lot of similar conference resources right there at that bottom link. And I am happy to answer any of your questions. I want to help you guys be successful with this because it's great for kids, it's great for teachers. So do your best to make this happen. And if student-led conferences aren't quite right for you, use Seesaw to drive your regular parent-teacher conferences. It's a great way to make that happen. So with that, Julie, I'll head back to you. I'm sure there's a few questions out there.
Yes, and please feel free to type in a few more questions. We still have a couple more minutes, so don't hesitate if you have something you want to ask Andrea. We've had a few good ones coming in, and Andrea, what a great job. That was so thorough, and you gave everybody so many good ideas. So I can't wait for them to get your slides later and take a closer look. This is a really great question coming in from Sarah, and I think, Andrea, both you and I will have some perspective on this and can help her with it. She's saying, like, if you teach in a school where some parents are low tech or no tech, how do you connect with them and how do you share Seesaw? And one thing I would maybe say first is that Seesaw at conference time is a perfect way for parents to get exposure to Seesaw. So even if they've never connected before and have never looked at the journal, then having a student-led conference like the kind Andrea is describing would be a great way to get them exposed to that portfolio. And then we have a couple other ways too. We would encourage you to have parents come in to an event like at a library or media center, maybe an off hours event that's not during the school day, and let parents come in and view a portfolio that way. Andrea, do you have any other tips to give Sarah about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. Conferences are a great place to catch parents and have a QR code available so they can get connected with their student. Especially, a lot of parents might feel a little uneasy, like, what is this? I'm not sure. So them being able to see it, that's a great place to make that happen and for them to feel more comfortable. Some of our parents don't have access to technology, which makes it tricky. But the cool thing about Seesaw is that you can find it online. You know, it doesn't have to be your phone or an iPad or a tablet. It can be on a computer at the library. So encourage parents to find access wherever they can.
A couple other questions coming in. This one's from Michelle, and Peg had kind of asked about this earlier. How do you handle it if, like, do you want these items to be a surprise for parents at this conference? Like, how do you make it so that they haven't seen it, or do you worry too much about that?
That's a great question, and I meant to touch on that. A lot of our parents are connected, so they have seen all of these items, most likely. But during the conference, you know, you encourage kids to not just show the item, you want them to talk about the item. So talk about their learning from the item, and most likely the parent and the kid have not done that at home. And so by having a more thorough conversation, I think that makes it okay that they've seen it before.
That's actually a really great idea. Andrea S. is asking Andrea B., how do you work in all of your data conversations into a student-led conference? And that's a really good question, too. Like, so if you have the student there, but you need to go over some data, like, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that can be kind of touchy, and you definitely just want to use your judgment on that. I always let the student kind of begin our student-led conference, and then when they were finished, I chimed in with my own details. So that included the data or the report card, things like that. So it definitely made it a longer conference, but you know, I needed to share things too, and so we made it work. But definitely use your judgment on some of those things.
And similarly, Andrea, what about like anything related to behavior? Do those conversations come up in a student-led conference?
You know, it kind of depends on how you work in your classroom. For me, a lot of those conversations had already been had before the conference had taken place, so the parents and probably the kids were aware of those behavior issues and areas for improvement. But again, use your best judgment and however you work in your classroom.
That's good to know. These are some really great questions coming in. Gabrielle is asking if you use like sentence starters. I can't remember if you have that in your resources anywhere to share, like
Yeah.
for students to talk about.
Yeah, you could definitely, that's a great idea to make some sentence starters. I had that script that was available that kind of started sentences for kiddos, at least so they didn't forget what they were supposed to say. But for little guys, that would be a fantastic idea.
That is like so helpful when you think about it. And you guys are going to love getting these slides later because you can go through these links one at a time and check out all of Andrea's awesome resources that she's been so nice to share with us. So you can take your time later when you get the slides and kind of look through everything and see what you might be able to use and what would be helpful to you. And then, like Andrea said, you can always reach out to her on Twitter, or she's even willing to answer email if you have some questions about how she's done her conferences. And I'm being sincere when I say she was kind of a pioneer for me and was basically the first person in our district to do it this way. And then I was so motivated to want to do it that way with big kids, even after having been a teacher for many, many years and having never done it that way. So I learned a lot from her, and I hope you guys have too in tonight's webinar. So I don't have any more questions coming in, so I think we're about to wrap up. Don't forget you can find some more PDs to listen to at web.seesaw.me/PDs. And we do have a live Seesaw chat coming up this Thursday, November 9th. So you can join us at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Twitter if you're interested in participating in that. Otherwise, thanks so much for attending tonight. Thanks again, Andrea, and hope to hear from you guys really soon. Thank you.
Thanks.